Are you ready to unlock a game-changing animation technique? Well, this secret weapon will elevate your work to the next level. So let's dive in.
And who best to talk about breakdowns but Richard Williams. It's not too hard to find the extreme keys, but how do you find those breakdowns and what do you do with those breakdowns? And I think the best way to think about it is the way to think about it as a 2D animator, especially when you're working from your imagination. So you could draw your key poses or the breakdowns, which you might want to think as a straight in between. For instance, let's take a look at this finger opening up. So you have these two extremes in the black ink right here, and then it's opening up. The computer might give this to you as a straight in between. Everything's sort of calculated halfway. So it's going to give you something that is directly linearly calculated halfway as an in between. If you think about the breakdowns as something approximately halfway, but there's a little bit of a change in the way it's done. In this case, it's sort of like you're dragging that last digit of your finger and then you're opening it up. So the breakdown is sort of that midway beat between the two. The computer can give you this very easily, but what you can do is let the computer give you this and then sort of mold it into this breakdown. Nothing is really robotically moving from one key pose to the other, but this is a much more organic way of looking at it. And in between by the computer might give you something like this, where the toe never bends, but you know in reality, as you're peeling off, this heel rotation from here to here will probably end up over here, but with this, it's sort of the same thing, but what you're still getting is that bent toe. Now, if you get the Richard Williams book, he goes into big detail on all of this. I was fortunate enough to witness him give this lecture. This was back in the 90s when he came to the Warner Brothers studio when they had their feature animation department. And he was there for a whole weekend, and everybody who was an animator would attend his lecture. And he spent a lot of time on the breakdown and the ability of how the breakdown can really make your animation much more interesting. So here you have, like in a standard walk cycle, you could do a crazy passing position to change up a walk cycle and make it much more interesting. Here, he's talking a little bit about the breakdown, and he says here, a great way to get flexibility is where we're going to place the breakdown drawing. And the breakdown drawing in a walk cycle would be considered a passing position, or it's the middle position. So where do we go in the middle? It's crucial. As we've seen with walks, it gives character to the move. It's a traveler, it's a transitional position. It's where we put it is so important. It's the secret of animation. One of the things that when he said that, it kind of opened up my eyes completely to animation and just changed everything, how I approached it. And it really made a big difference in my own animation. So I'm kind of passing that on to you just to really take that to heart and really think about it when you're animating. Just basically, when you want to go from A to B, how is that middle breakdown pose going to be interesting? A little bit more interesting than just a straight linear interpretation. Just going boringly from A to B. Go somewhere else that's interesting en route from A to B. Don't go from A to B, go from A to X to B, go from A to G to B, go somewhere else but in the middle. I ended up feeling so strongly about the breakdown that for years I went around ranting and raving that I could write a whole book about it. So I'm going to show you some examples of just like a simple head turn. If you have a character from smiling to sad, you could do something that's sort of straight as an in-between. It's okay, it works, but it's kind of dull. So then now he starts to give you all the different kinds of ways to do it. So let's say your breakdown, maybe something like this to that. Then you can just try to feel it in your own face as you're trying to animate this in your head. The timing of it would be that it's sort of like kind of a moving hold, and then it just snaps into you can sort of maybe change with the eyes. You can see there's always a different way of doing it. You can stretch the face here. You can rotate the head up a little bit. And then you can see all kinds. And he starts to get really super wacky with this idea of changing the breakdown. You can tilt the mouth. You can change the eyes here. You can stretch the jaw. Silly crazy face over here. You can pucker the the face here, and he's not done. He's still going more, so he goes even crazier with all these things. You could just let the computer kind of interpolate between here and here, and then here and here. If you have a simple head tilt, what you could do, now here, this is a straight in-between tilt, right? And that's very robotic. But if you can find something, even in your reference, if you see the two extremes, what's happening? Is there a little tilt in between that reference, between those two poses? So in this case, he's leading more or less with the chin and then coming down. Or in this, he's leading more with the forehead and coming down, right? So it's still kind of halfway. This one is exactly halfway, but what you're doing is sort of like tilting it. So you can see that maybe the center, the pivot point center is in the middle. That's halfway, right? You got the pivot point here, and pivot point there. That's halfway. But what you're doing is you're just changing the angle of it. Again, going from here to here, sort of the same idea here, but you're changing angles. And then another example is from here to here. If, let's say you had two cutout poses right here, right? So what you could do is take the first cutout. This one is sort of in between, halfway with the hat, but he's only rotating his head down first, and then he's going into that. But you see that what's going on here is that it's the same head. It's almost a copy. It is a copy actually of the first pose, but what he's done is just he copied the first pose and put it as a breakdown, and then he just put it in a place roughly halfway, but not quite. So you can do that in the same way when you're thinking in terms of your own animation, and if you try to find it in the reference, it's even better. And if you want to, if the reference is a little bit boring between A to B, maybe you can kind of switch it up a little bit and add something.